technology also affects productivity of workers. And improvements in technology are a huge source of economic growth. In fact, in the very long run, it is improvements in technology, technological progress that drive very long run economic growth. If we think of the way people lived, 300 years ago versus today, the developments over these 300 years has been due mainly to technological progress. It's the single most important source of productivity improvements over time. And for developed countries, for rich countries, it's pretty much only the only source, the only reliable source of economic growth. Because for developed countries, countries that are already rich, you can say, they've already taken advantage of the capital accumulation. They've already built up their physical capital, built up their human capital, already have good training and universities and school systems, already build up the infrastructure and factories, etc. How do they have more growth? They can't build up more physical capital, build up more human capital. It's already built up. We have diminishing returns, diminishing marginal returns to these factors, and keep on adding more physical capital and human capital. So where else can you get it from? You can't get it from land and natural resources. You can't build those up. So you get it from technology. You get it from technological progress. So in the very long run, technological progress is the source of growth for developed countries. So this technological progress, technological knowledge is something that's embodied in the society as a whole, in the universities and the school system of the societies. Our understanding of how to make things is embodied in the firms, the production companies, the production processes. We are not necessarily producing more. Now, to some extent, technological progress enables us to produce more of the same thing. But to a much larger extent, what it's doing is allowing us to producing higher value products, new products, better products, products that replace 10 things from the past. Your mobile phone replace 10 different electronic gadgets. You don't need a digital camera now. You don't need a video recorder. You don't need a voice recorder. You don't need a mobile phone. Smartphone does it. And you don't need a daily planner. You don't need a calculator. All into that one smartphone. So it enables us to produce higher value products. And so technological progress, better technological knowledge enables us to produce more and more value using less resources. And this is our source for economic growth in the long run. So given that technological progress is so important for long-run economic growth, what can governments do about it? Well, they do encourage research and development by funding universities, funding research and development, giving tax breaks to companies that invest in research and development. And also, they also have patent laws that reward the discoveries of new things. Patent laws and copyright laws especially are controversial among economists because a lot of economists feel that they've gone too far, that the patent laws now are too strict and they restrict, they actually hold back technological growth rather than promoting it. But to some extent, patents and protection of discoveries, protection of property rights of the discoverers promotes economic growth. Now, what's the difference between human capital and technological knowledge? Human capital is embodied in the worker. So it's the skills, the knowledge, the ability of the worker. And when the worker dies, that human capital dies with the worker. So that's diminishing returns there. You can only build up so much human capital within a worker, and then the worker dies after a while. That's lost. Technological knowledge, though, is embodied in the society as a whole, and you can keep on adding to this. It suffers less from diminishing returns. And some economists actually don't believe it suffers from diminishing returns. You can just keep on having more and more technological knowledge, technological progress, and this will carry us into the future. So, like I said, it's the only source, only reliable source of long run, very long run economic growth. And fifthly, a good political, legal, institutional environment is also important for economic growth. So part of the reason why rich countries grew faster and some countries did not grow is because governments have a big impact on this growth process, and countries that had good governments, that had good institutions, allowed their countries to grow. Whereas governments that are not very good, corrupt, despotic governments that take the property away from people, they hold back economic growth. Governments that oppress the people, confiscate goods of the people, take away the property of the people without rule of law or the corruption. You've got to pay some official somewhere to get anything done. This can hold back economic growth. And political stability is also very important to economic growth. Countries with civil wars and unrest, they often don't grow. In fact, the economies will even start to shrink. Countries with a lot of political violence, coups, with governments overthrown and chaos, the economy will then fall apart. So you need a strong central government that's not corrupt, that has rule of law, that enforces rules, and enables people to accumulate property and protects the property of the people, protects the rights of the people. Then you can have economic progress. Also, it needs to be inclusive, allows everyone to benefit, doesn't oppress particular groups of people, doesn't just benefit small elite groups of people, but includes the whole society. This allows more economic progress. So, for example, the political system is important for economic growth. If you look at the experience of China, China used to be the most technologically advanced country in the world, the richest country in the world. But many years of corruption and chaos and civil war caused China to fall behind. And so we had a few hundred years where, well, ruled by the Qing dynasty, a foreign dynasty first, and then corruption and chaos and civil war in the 20th century. This meant that China fell behind, and there was not the government system there to enable growth. And so we did not have economic growth. But once the political system became stable and more inclusive and allowed people to do business and allowed people to accumulate property, and you have fiscal capital accumulation, then you have fast growth after that. So just technological progress by itself is not enough for growth. You need a good political system as well. You can say it's part of the society's technology. So the most important thing for economic growth is a stable political system enforcing rules, property rights, and political stability, where people can accumulate property and be protected in their property. Yeah, yeah, rules of law which you're sure everyone must follow. Even the government must follow it. The government just doesn't come and confiscate other people randomly. So the elites, so just because your uncle is the governor of a province means that you can come and take something away from someone. If that happens, that does not encourage economic growth. Yeah. So no matter what your connections are, or whether your family is part of the elite, it does not give you extra rights. Instead, the rights of everyone is protected. That encourages economic growth. So political stability, following of rules, law, and property rights, respect for property rights, and low corruption, that encourages growth. Now, this is the main thesis of this book by the economists Acemoglu and Robinson from MIT. They're two of the leading economic growth economists in the world today. I encourage you to read this book, Why Nations Fail. And this is a thesis believed by a lot of economists that if you look at the very long run, 300-400 years, why were some countries held back? They did not experience economic growth, whereas other countries experienced economic growth. So why did the US versus Mexico go back 300 years, about the same? Why did the US experience high economic growth and Mexico didn't? So what's the difference? And their thesis is that the difference lies in the institutions and the governments. In countries where the governments are what they call inclusive, they include the entire society. They don't serve the elite. Instead, there's a strong central government that holds back the elite and serves the people. Then, in countries like this, these countries have faster economic growth because the people can accumulate property and they're protected in their capital accumulation. Whereas in the countries that failed, in Africa, South America, the governments were formed by the elites, and the governments served the elite rather than serving the people. So the governments put in rules that benefited a small group of people and harmed the larger group of people. The elite people, the people with connections, just took away, just whatever they wanted, they just took it. For example, is in Indonesia, for example, they're so corrupt. If you wanted to do business, any sort of thing, open a hotel, start a factory, you had to make one of the Suharto family members your partner, or some governor's son your partner. You had to essentially give them half your factory. Otherwise, you can't do anything. So this sort of environment just holds back economic progress. And then if you start a factory, it's doing well, and your partner is Suharto's nephew's wife or something, and it's doing well, and they just decide to kick you out and they take over the factory. So this sort of environment, this corruption holds back economic growth. Whereas in countries where the governments protect the people and there's a rule of law, then that encourages economic growth. Okay, lastly, another factor that affects economic growth and GDP per capita is the population of the country. Now, population increase has a different effect on GDP versus GDP per capita. When you have more population and more labor, this actually increases production, GDP. A country with a lot of people produces more because labor is a factor of production. But when you look at GDP per capita, take the production and divide it by the total population, a larger population means there's less per person. GDP per capita is less when the population is large. So China is a very large population country. So it produces a lot, much larger economy than Switzerland. Switzerland has much fewer people, smaller economy, but it's got so very few people, given the production there, it's got a high GDP per capita. And so they have high living standards, divide by fewer people. And having more people will tend to lower GDP per capita in a few ways. One way is that when you have more and more people, you have these people, you need to feed them, you need to use, everyone needs to use land. There's a limited amount of land and natural resources. It stretches this land and natural resources to divide among more and more and more people. And so that will lower, they'll impoverish the people if there's more and more people. So population growth will mean that living standards will be low. And secondly, when you have high population growth, the increase in the capital labor ratio that comes from investment will tend to be lower. The reason is you've got to provide capital for any new workers that enter the workforce to keep your capital labor ratio constant. So suppose that your labor force is increasing 10% per year. This means you must increase your capital, total amount of capital, 10% per year, just to keep the same capital labor ratio. So the higher, the faster the increase in your workforce, the lower is the increase in your capital labor ratio, because a lot of your investment just needs to go to keeping your capital labor ratio constant. So stretching natural resources, diluting any sort of increase in your training or your capital, this holds back economic growth. And on average, countries with faster population growth will tend to have slower economic growth. And this was a concern, of course, for China when they instituted the one-child policy, because they were afraid that with very high population growth, natural resources will get stretched, China will not develop, and so GDP per capita would stay low. And so they instituted the one-child policy to hold back population growth in order to encourage more economic progress. And to some extent, this has succeeded. But some economists argue that actually the one-child policy was not the main driver of lower population growth in China. Instead, the main driver of lower population growth was increasing education levels. So especially for women. So if you increase the years of schooling of women, this keeps them in school longer. They didn't get married younger. If you don't get married younger, you don't have as many children. Imagine a society where people only got 6 years of education. After 6 years of education, you're 12 years old. You either go to work, or if you're a girl in a patriarchal society, you get married. So you're 12, 13, you have children. By the time you're 30 years old, you might have 5, 6 children. Whereas in a society like China today, where women are in university, you don't get a job until maybe you're 23, 24. You get married at 25, 26. You're lucky to have a child, one child by the time you're 30. And so that really cuts back on the population growth rate. So a lot of economists think actually the main driver of the the lowering population growth in China over the last 30, 40 years has actually been increasing number of years of education.